Hi everyone, my name is Rayven. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Rainbow Veteran, and welcome back to another episode of the Rainbow Veteran Podcast. On today's episode, I am going to be wrapping up Transgender Awareness Month with some transgender people in U.S. history that I think are important to not only our community, but to U.S. history as a whole. Now, for those of you who don't know, Transgender Awareness Month is a big month of reflection. While, yes, it does show that, hey, the transgender community is here, near the end of the month, like the second to last week on the 20th, Transgender Day of Remembrance happens, where we reflect as a community on those we have lost in the trans community, either locally, or across the state, or even internationally. And it's sad. It's a day to remember that we still have a lot of work to do to ensure that we are treated fairly and equally. I, unfortunately, because of my health, wasn't able to make it to a lot of the events outside, but I did do some things online with the different online communities that I am a part of. But big shout out to Sisters PGH. They are a Black and trans led organization who is doing a lot of good work here in Pittsburgh. I'll put a link in the description below. But huge, huge thank you for them. They always put on a great event around advocacy and remembrance. Maybe great's not the best word, but they do a lot of good work to make sure that those we have lost are honored, especially here in the Pittsburgh community. I am trying to do a lot more work with them. Hopefully in the near future. Just my health this month has been really bad. Chronic illness is a bitch. But going back into the main meat and potatoes of the episode, I do want to talk about transgender history in the US. And there was a lot of research that went into this, and the list is longer than even I expected. I have narrowed it down to 4 people out of a list that was originally 20. Let's put that in perspective. I have right now 9 pages of notes on just these 4 people. My first episode, which was like about an hour and a half, was 10 pages of notes. There are a lot of people in the US, celebrities, writers, doctors, scientists, advocates, lawyers, even service members in our history here in the US. And I've already touched a little on Christine Jorgensen as being one of the more early open trans people, especially around World War II or post-World War II. But I'm going to be talking about more outside that realm, with the exception of the first one. So this list is in no particular order. This is in no set of the timeline of history. This is just a list I made as I was doing research. And I feel pretty confident in this list, so please join me as we get started with our first person, Monica Helms. Now, Monica Helms, I felt like should have been first on my list because she is my elder in multiple ways. Yes, she's a trans woman. She's also a Navy veteran. Very reflective of my story, so I felt a deep connection with her and her story. Monica Helms is best known for the creation of the transgender pride flag, using the baby colors associated with gender of babies when they were born around that time. The light blue for boys, pink for girls. She wanted a way to reflect that in the flag, and using it to show solidarity for those who don't fall into the binary with the white. Now, Helms did serve in the Navy between 1970 and 1978. She served on 2 submarines, USS Francis Scott Keyes and USS Flasher. During her time in the Navy, she began to dress as a woman, as her authentic self, while being stationed in Charleston, South Carolina. In an interview, she described this time as the deepest, darkest secret in her life. And it's not surprising. I mean, we're seeing what we're doing to transgender service members now, but just imagine how bad it was during the 70s. You were still being kicked out of the military just for being gay, openly. Holmes left the Navy in 1978 and eventually joined her hometown chapter of the U.S. Submarine Veterans in 1996. After she began transitioning, she reapplied in 1998 to the Phoenix, Arizona chapter under her name Monica. Sadly, she received a ton of pushback, including being referred to a generic women's veteran group rather than the specific submarine group. After a few months of advocating for herself, she did join as the organization's first trans woman. In 1999, Monica made the first ever transgender pride flag that was shown during 2000's Phoenix Pride. And in fact, this flag has been donated to the Smithsonian National Museum of American History in D.C. And I'm hoping to actually go out when they show it in a curated display, like if they do like a Pride event or LGBT history event in the Smithsonian. I would love to see that flag in person. In 2003, Monica founded TAVA, the Trans American Veteran Association, where she worked as president until 2013. Now, I am actually part of this organization, and I'm in the Discord for it. It is a great organization, one that I'm hoping to work more with. I'm still just kind of a general member, kind of in and out as my health permits it with working and focusing on common defense stuff, but I do want to have those two organizations work together along with minority veterans. In 2004, TAVA sponsored the first ever Trans Veterans March to the Wall. 50 trans vets visited D.C. and marched to the Vietnam Memorial Wall to honor those they have lost and knew. They also made history as the first open transgender organization and people who laid a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns. At the Tomb of the Unknowns, and they did it again in 2005. And I can't speak enough about Monica Helms. She is still alive today. She does stuff online and is a huge advocate. She has a book, I believe it's More Than a Flag, where she talks about her life as a trans woman and figuring out her gender in the 70s. It's a book that is in my big to be read list, to be honest. My to be read list could fill this studio, honestly. But it was nice to be able to see and hear from her. Sadly, she is thinking about fleeing the country. Apparently, I saw online. Take that with a grain of salt. I have not confirmed if that is accurate or not. I just saw that online of her thinking about it, apparently. And it's really hard. It's really hard to see someone like that thinking about it when, I mean, the thought has crossed my mind as well, but I served this nation. I served in the hopes of what it could be and what the Constitution stands for and what, equality for all means. And I'm not going to leave without a fight. That's for sure. But before I get too down and everything on this episode, let's continue on with our next historical figure, Kyler Brodus. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's either Brodus or Broadus. I did not look up the pronunciation. But Kyler is an attorney, an entrepreneur, and a trans rights activist. He is still alive today and founded the Trans People of Color Coalition, or TPOCC. The organization was founded in 2010. It was the first national organization in the United States to specifically address the needs of trans people of color. Its mission is to provide a voice for trans people of color, foster community leadership, and advocate justice for all trans people through training, presentations about intersectionality of various forms of oppression, including racism, transphobia, transmisogyny, and at a time when LGBTQI plus rights movement in the U.S. continues to be led primarily by white activists and often fails to focus on issues that specifically affect trans people of color. TPOCC brings the experiences of trans people of color from the margins to the center of discussion and enables them to be seen as their full selves. And I really wanted to bring this person, I wanted to bring Kyler and his work and the TPOCC into light for a lot of folks. I know a lot of you recognize, especially in the trans community, that a lot of those who we lose regularly, year after year after year, are trans women of color. They are disproportionately affected by hate and bigotry. I know I have privilege. And as a white person, I have a lot of fucking privilege in this country. Sure, I'm marginalized because I'm trans. Marginalized because I'm a woman. But I still have a lot of fucking privilege being a white person. And I wanted to amplify TPOCC on this episode. And I wanted to talk about and emphasize Kylar's work and talk about what he has done. And I wanted to show TPOCC off. Because they are an amazing because they are an amazing organization that I feel we need to support. Broadus worked for a large financial institute, going on his background, in early 1990s. In 1995, he announced he was going to undergo gender transition. This resulted in Broadus facing a constructive discharge notice in 1997 after facing workplace harassment and discrimination. He was unemployed for a year and developed post-traumatic stress from the harassment. For 18 years, Broadus worked in a private law firm in Columbia, Missouri, where he represented LGBT clients in family and criminal law. He taught business law and workplace discrimination at Lincoln University for nearly 20 years, where he served as the chair of the business department. He served on the National LGBTQ Task Force as a senior public policy counsel, which is huge. Huge thing to do, and such an amazing position for him. And it just shows his dedication to our community and the trans community of color. He was the director of the force's Transgender Civil Rights Project, and he even worked as the state legislative manager and counsel for the Human Rights Campaign. A huge, huge advocate putting in the work. And I don't think a lot of people knew about him. I sure shit didn't before I started working on this. And it shows how much of a dedication we have from our trans siblings of color. And we need to focus and lift them up. We need to listen to them. From 2007 to 2010, he was the board chair of the National Black Justice Coalition. And in 2010, he founded the Trans People of Color Coalition. In 2012, he was one of 13 transgender delegates at the DNC, or Democratic National Convention. That year, he became the first openly transgender person to testify to the United States Senate, where he spoke of his support for the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and he was interviewed in the Book of Pride. He was present next to President Obama during the signing of the 2014 executive order regarding further amendments to Executive Order 11478, also known as the Equal Employment Opportunity in Federal Government, and Executive Order 11246, Equal Employment Opportunity to Protect LGBT employees from workplace discrimination. In 2019, he was awarded the In 2019, he was awarded the Trans Trailblazer Award by the LGBT Bar Association of Los Angeles. I would love to have him on the show and just hear his stories. Not even just interview him, just let him talk and share his story with y'all and with me. Just to listen. And that's the thing I've always been interested, as a little side tangent, those live libraries where like you sit down with another person and you hear their story. It's why I like StoryCorps so much, because you just hear the stories of people's experiences. And I hope that one day I can do just a fraction of what Kyler's done and just be a big advocate for the trans community. And I'm trying my best. Working with disability is hard, but I'm trying. And I hope this podcast is a great way to amplify trans stories, LGBT history, and just a huge connection with my fellow veterans. Now, moving on to one that I don't think a lot of people pay enough attention to. This one, another trans man, is a big push in medical science. And while I knew what his research done for medicine, I had no idea he was trans. I'm talking about Dr. Alan Hart, a medical pioneer, a physician, a radiologist, a tuberculosis researcher, writer, and novelist. Hart was the first person to use X-ray images to detect early stages of tuberculosis, something that was killing Americans and people across the world in record numbers, especially during the mid to late 1800s. Now, this is now common practice to use X-rays for tuberculosis detection, but before Hart, it was completely unheard of or even thought about. With Hart's innovation, it had become the gold standard that many researchers to this day state that Hart has saved countless lives across the world. In 1917, Hart was the first trans man in the U.S. to undergo a hysterectomy. Hart devoted much of his career into research and treatment of tuberculosis. In the early 20th century, the disease was the biggest killer in America. Doctors, including Hart, were realizing that a myriad of illnesses were all causes of tuberculosis. These include things I cannot pronounce, but I'm going to try anyway. Consumption, phthisis pulmonalis, Koch's disease, Scrofula, lupus vulgaris, white plague, king's evil, Pott's disease, and gibbous. These are all causes of tuberculosis. Now, TB usually attacked the victim's lungs first, and Hart was among the first physicians to document how it spread. Specifically, how it spread via the circulatory system, causing lesions on the kidneys, spine, and even the brain. Eventually, it did result in death. If you played Red Dead Redemption 2, you have seen firsthand what it does to somebody. Arthur, spoiler alert for a game that's been out for like over 5 years, but Arthur Morgan does suffer from tuberculosis, and you see what happens physically to a person with it. It was pretty accurate. Scientists had discovered in the 19th century that tuberculosis was not a hereditary disease, but an airborne bacillus spreading rapidly among persons in close proximity by coughing and sneezing. This meant it might be treatable. But with no cure for the disease in its advanced stages, the only hope for sufferers was early detection. X-rays, or Roentgen rays, as they were commonly known up until the Second World War, had been discovered only in 1895. It was a really new technology when Hart was working with it. And Hart, when it was invented, was only 5 years old. In the early 20th century, they were used to detect bone fractures and tumors. but Hart had become interested in their potential for detecting tuberculosis. Since the disease often presented no symptoms in its early stages, X-ray X-ray screening was invaluable for early detection. Even rudimentary early X-ray machines could detect the disease before it became critical. This allowed early treatment, often saving the patient's lives. And it only got better with X-rays becoming better and more powerful. It also meant sufferers could be identified and isolated from the population, greatly lessening the spread of the disease. Hart established numerous mass X-ray clinics to identify non-symptomatic TB cases in cities across the country. Public funding raising drives like the newly created Christmas Seal campaign helped finance these efforts. By the time antibiotics were introduced in the 1940s, doctors used the techniques Hart developed and managed to cut the tuberculosis death toll down to 1/15 of what it had previously been. In 1937, Hart was hired by the Idaho Tuberculosis Association and later became the state's tuberculosis control officer. He established Idaho's first fixed location and mobile TB screening clinics and spearheaded the state's war against tuberculosis. Between 1933 and Hart traveled extensively through rural Idaho, covering thousands of miles while giving lectures, conducting mass TB screenings, and training new staff to treat the effects of the epidemic. An experienced and accessible writer, Hart wrote widely for medical journals and popular publications, describing TB for technical and general audiences, and giving advice on its prevention, detection, and cure. At the time, the word tuberculosis carried a social stigma akin to venereal diseases, so Hart insisted his clinics refer to it as a chest clinic, and himself as a chest doctor. And his patients were chest patients. Discretion and compassion were important tools in treating the stigmatized disease. Something a lot of doctors today can learn. Especially over here at UPMC. Sorry, UPMC is under my radar right now, and they've really pissed me off. In 1943, Hart, now recognized as preeminent in the field of tuberculosis rhodogenology, or X-raying, compiled his extensive evidence on TB and other X-ray detections into definitive compendium titled These Mysterious Rays, a non-technical discussion of the uses of X-rays and radium, chiefly in medicine, published by Harper and Brothers. It's still a standard text today and used in a lot of medical teachings. One of my bigs, my big in my fraternity in college, when she was going into pharmacy, I believe this was something she would have read. It was the first general audience book on this subject and allowed patients to understand how X-rays were helpful diagnostic tools in a wide variety of cases. In the book, Hart also worked to dispel widespread safety concerns about X-ray technology, an artifact of the validity of the first generation of X-ray machines. These Mysterious Rays was translated into Spanish and several other languages. As in Idaho, Hart took charge of a massive statewide X-ray screening program for TB, emphasizing the importance of early detection and treatment. He held this position for the rest of his life and is credited with helping contain the spread of tuberculosis in Connecticut, as he had previously in the Pacific Northwest. Similar programs based on his leadership and methodology in his field in other states also saved thousands of lives. Upon reaching adulthood, Hart sought psychiatric counseling and surgery to continue passing as a man. Hart was the first documented transgender male transition in the United States through sex reassignment surgery, or gender confirmation surgery as it's called today, and had been carried out in early Germany. including on one man treated by German sexologist Magnus Hirschfeld, who ran the sex research institute that the Nazis burnt down in World War II. In 1906 and 1907, case of Carl M. Baer had new edit. In 1906 and 1907, the case of Carl M. Baer had set new precedent for sex reassignment surgery by enlisting simultaneous support for psychiatric, legal, and surgical corners. This was now medical and legal precedent for transitioning. With Hart's approval to his own transition appears to have drawn on the Baer case. So, I added that little tidbit at the end about his transition because of just how much work Hart has done for medical science. And a lot of people will say, like, oh, being trans is new. Oh, you're just like holed up in your room and depressed all the time. You lose all your friends and your interest. And Hart proves that's just completely false. On all levels. We have a huge advancement in medical science that has saved, probably at this point internationally, millions of lives. Don't quote me on that number. That's just a ballpark guess. But considering how many people we have on this fucking planet, and we've been doing it for what, fucking 70 years, give or take, at least as a practice. Hart has saved thousands of millions of lives. One trans man has done that, and when I realized that he was trans, I knew I had to put him in this list because the history and just advancements of medical science is just amazing of what, something that someone has done within our own community. It's great. And I know there's many more out there, including Biden's what was her name? I'm gonna look this up real quick because I cannot remember. Biden, Chief Medical Trans? I'm just gonna look that up real fast. Rachel Levine. Who was the United States Assistant Secretary of Health. That's what it was. She was the Assistant Secretary of Health. Which I think what was the highest position any trans person has ever gotten with the federal government as of right now. Which I probably should have added her to this list too. But I felt like Hart's just advancement in medical science was way, way greater and needed to be fucking emphasized. And so we're going to end this going back even further in time, just slightly, with Janae June. Now, Janae June was a pseudonym for an American writer from the Victorian and Edwardian era, known for advancing the rights of people who did not conform to gender and sexual norms. June was one of the earliest transgender individuals to publish an autobiography in the United States. Although June expressed a lifelong desire to be a woman, June consistently used he/him pronouns in referencing to himself in his own writing. June wrote of feeling the combination of both male and female, and of his practice of alternating between these two gender expressions. So, really early non-binary. I mean, you could look at this and argue trans woman, but the combination of male and female and alternating, to me, reads how I felt when I identified as gender fluid. And again, this is in the Victorian era. Like, this is old. This is post-Civil War. Right before very early Industrial Revolution, if not just before it. When he was writing, and I'm just going to use what, he referred to himself. It was very heavily in the Industrial Revolution. The first published autobiography he wrote was the Autobiography of an Androgen in 1918, and his second, The Female Impersonators, in 1922. June also authored an unpublished third autobiography in 1921, which historians discovered in 2010. June's stated goal in writing these books was to help create what he would have wanted for himself. Been there with some of my writings. An accepting environment for young adults who do not conform to gender or sexual norms. He also wanted to prevent youth from committing suicide. Around 1895, June also created an organization for the rights of androgens. Together with others like himself, most, if not all, members wrote and noted June as the ultimate androgen being. June also wrote under other pseudonyms as of Earl Lynn and Ralph Werthers, which are sometimes incorrectly mistaken as their birth names. June's birth name and legal name have been considered lost to history and is not certain, which good. We don't dead name here. Queer history researcher Channing Gerald Joseph claims June was most likely the writer and journalist Israel Maury Sabin, an early advocate for gender and sexual diversity, but that is still just a guess with no confirmation. During the Victorian and Edwardian eras, people did not use words like transgender, transsexual, gay, or non-binary. June described himself with all of these contemporary words for his gender and sexual variants, and I've added these words with the definitions, because I know we did LGBT slang earlier, but some of these are so old that I didn't even touch them, and I actually had to look up what these were. So androgen, meaning a combination of masculine and feminine qualities, being androgynous, is where it comes from. Invert, a contemporary word from psychiatric and sexology for all kinds of people who would, in the 20th and 21st century, be called LGBT. Earning, at the time, new contemporary word, meaning someone assigned male at birth who is attracted to men. This word was created by the Earnings themselves, who advocated in their rights, and it was often angelicized as Iranian, but June used the original Germanic version, Earning, for himself. Bisexual, in the sense that being both male and female, as June said, was never attracted to women at all. Instinctive female impersonator, meaning it was in his nature to live as a woman. Fairy, spelled specifically F-A-I-R-I-E, a word used in contemporary underworld for people who were assigned male at birth who had resected sex with men, which where fairy as in slang insult for gay men comes from. Ultra androgen, meaning that at the very end of androgen, who both felt and acted predominantly female, those of this type were described as shaving and plucking beard hair, in public preferencing bright clothing in lieu of risk-associated female clothing. Although some risque did don the latter. Further, they usually took to submissive or passive roles during intercourse and despised vulgarity and other typical masculine things. Damn. Edit. Additionally, JW states the correct pronouns for an ultra-androgen would be she, her. A quote from her second book reads, "Superficially and according to man-made law, ultra-androgens are men. According to the unabridged dictionary, they are neither men nor women. That is, they are capable neither or begetting nor convincing, but in respect to the mind and feelings in respect to their protoplasm, and thus, essentially, they were women." JW estimated they numbered at least 1 in every 300 people globally. Many of these names reflect the contemporary way of thought, which made no distinction between gender identity and sexual orientation. The popular idea during the era was that a man attracted to men must be somehow partially a woman, in the brain or even the body. And this is where older DSMs for the United States will count being gay as a mental illness, and that kind of sexual orientation has some play in gender identity, and that if you're gay, you really want to be a woman. And a lot of that issues still carry on today from those old fucking beliefs. Some contemporaries recognize that this was not true for everyone, arguing that men who liked men could just be as manly. However, for June, it was suitable description of how he felt. As young as ages 3 to 7, June expected that he would only wear skirts after growing up and asked playmates to call him Jenny. In that era, all young children wore dresses. When older boys would be breeched, that is, switching to more masculine apparel with trousers. When June's parents breeched him at 7, he was so heartbroken that he wished he was dead. He occasionally borrowed his sister's clothing and would often pray that he would be turned into a girl, and sometimes almost believed that his prayers were being answered. He began to develop some breast growth in his middle teens, possibly, hang on, give me a second to try to pronounce this, gynecomastia, which was not rare in people who were assigned male at birth. He was disappointed that his genitals remained the same, and at 14 he began to instead pray for 1 to 2 hours a day to no longer desire to be a girl and to no longer desire men. At 18, June became so depressed about being an invert that he sought medical help to make him feel like a normal male. Early conversion therapy. The two New York medical professors went to venereologist Dr. Prince A. Morrow and then alienist Dr. Robert S. Newton. Both saw intervention as a defect. Both saw inversion as a defect and attempted for months to cure him of it by every known method. Alienist is basically an early Victorian word for what we would call a psychiatrist today. June's treatments included drugs, hypnosis, aphrodisiacs, in hopes of making June attracted to women, and electrical stimulation to the brain and spinal cord, or electroconvulsive therapy, something that is still used in conversion therapy today. And people want to make it illegal again in this country. These treatments, like then and now, had no effect, and June remained an invert, depressed, and also a nervous wreck from the drugs. June's third doctor was an alienist who understood inversion better. The transcript of the manuscript of The Riddle of the Underworld also calls him Dr. R.S. Newton, giving the name to two different doctors, which is a transcript error. The alienist taught June that being an androgen was natural for him and not depravity. This finally cured June's lifelong depression, because instead of trying to purge himself of his inversion out of fear that it was a sin, he instead concluded that God had predestined him to be an invert. So basically, because I know that's a lot of like old Victorian era slang and words, a psychiatrist told him, hey, it's natural to be trans. And what do you know? It cured June's depression. Something that we're still, over 100 years later, still trying to fight that conversion therapy works and you can pray the gay away, and that being trans is unnatural when we've seen it in other animals. And the human species is very unique. I will say that. We are a very unique species. But it's really, really difficult to know that we've been dealing with this for hundreds of years in this country. And the fight's never over. It will never be over, sadly. And that's why we have to work in any way we can. Like, I have chronic pain. I'm disabled. I can't go out all the time, especially in this cold weather. The cold makes my symptoms worse. But I'm doing this podcast. I'm online advocating as best as I can. And when I can go out in places, I go out with other veterans who advocate for my LGBT community as a whole. Going back to June, though, according to one autobiography, June engaged with intimate relations with 800 young men, half of whom were soldiers or sailors. And I love that. Like, yes, the Navy is the quote-unquote gay branch, but let's be honest. All the branches are a little fruity. At the age of 28, June fulfilled a lifelong desire to have an erectotomy, or the removal of the testicles. June expected this would make him healthier and increase his extreme and disturbing desires for sex and eliminate some of the masculine features he disliked, such as facial hair. During that era, there was an incorrect but widespread medical disbelief that nocturnal emissions, or wet dreams, would damage a person's health and intelligence, and June was fearful of that possibility. Castration was one of the commonly recognized treatment thought to cure males of inversion. As a young adult, June found safe havens in places of gay bars, Paris Hall in New York City, to express his feminine identity. Paris Hall and the Columbia Hall was one of many establishments considered to be the center of homosexual nightlife, where male prostitutes would do as female prostitutes did, soliciting men under an effeminate persona. Places like Paris Hall provided a place where people like June could gather and feel free to express themselves and socialize with similar people in that time when cross-dressing was socially unacceptable and illegal. June was one of the members of the Circle Hermaphroditos in 1895, led by pseudonym Ronald Reeves, among other androgynes who frequented Paris Hall. The purpose of the organization was to unite for defense against the world's bitter persecution, and to show that being an invert was natural. The Circle is noted by transgender historian Susan Stryker as the first known informal organization in the United States to concern itself with what we might now call transgender social issues. Little evidence of the Circle's existence is known to survive today outside of June's autobiography. If it issued any pamphlets, none are yet known to historians. For this reason, some historians have raised questions about whether it even existed at all. And June's story mirrors, honestly, a lot of what we're doing today, just with today's language. And June was an early advocate and speaker on trans issues in 1895 and up to like the 1920s. Like, that's so weird to think about, considering that was like June started 100 years before I was born, and up to over 100 years ago today. And while things have gotten better in some areas, things haven't changed in others. Progress is slow, especially with minority groups. And we got to keep fighting, especially those who are minorities within our own community, in the trans and LGBT community as a whole. And intersectionality is a thing to be aware of and cognitive of. And I'm just scratching the surface. I literally, with almost an hour of recording, I am just scratching the surface of transgender history in the US. There are many, many more who are activists, many who helped people outside of our community, and some who have just changed the world for the better. Now, like I said, I may come back to this. I may do another part down the road. I may just do, like, next year's Transgender Awareness Month, do an entire series of this. I don't know, because there are so many people, and that research is going to take a lot of time. So I may take this whole next year just to do it in my free time. Because this list of what I originally had was a lot. And it was just names. I didn't even have their stories. It was just so many names that it filled 10 pages. So with that said, I'm going to end the episode here, everybody. Once again, my name is Rayven. I'm the Rainbow Veteran. Stay safe, stay vigilant, stay hydrated. I'll see you all in the next episode.